Hi everyone, let's start with today's concept capsules. The concepts that we're going to cover today are the various portfolio performance measures that we have, and specifically we're going to cover the Sharpe ratio, the Treynor ratio, and Jensen's alpha. Now there are more portfolio performance measures which are there, but these are considered to be the more important ones, and we're going to look at what is the interrelationship amongst these and what is the practical usefulness of these ratios. Now, whether you're studying for the CFA examination or the FRM examination, these concepts are something you will be seeing in your exam. These are highly testable for the exam. In fact, in the CFA curriculum, you would see these concepts across all the three levels. So level 1 has these multiple times, even in level 2 and level 3, you would be doing it again and again. So it would be very important for you to remember these concepts across all the levels of the examination. Okay. So let's start with the Sharpe ratio first. Now, Sharpe ratio is, in fact, till this date, considered to be the most important ratio. Its beauty actually lies in its simplicity. Now, of course, with simplicity comes a lot of problems and a lot of drawbacks of this ratio as well. But notwithstanding that, it still is considered to be the most popular ratio. It is reported by pretty much every hedge fund or every mutual fund. Whenever analysts are comparing the various funds, Sharpe ratio and Treynor ratios are still used, and same thing goes for Jensen's alpha. So it's not something which is only limited to your examination. It is widely used in real life as well. So let's start with Sharpe ratio. Let's see what this ratio is all about. Now this is the formula. Now let's try to understand what this formula is. In the numerator, you have RP and RF. RP is the return of the portfolio. RF, you would already be familiar with this term, is the risk-free rate. So in the numerator, we are using the excess return. Excess return means the return which you're getting in excess of the risk-free rate. Now think of it like this. If you have put your money into a particular investment fund, you obviously need more return than the risk-free rate. If you were happy getting the risk-free rate, you would have rather just gone and purchased a government bond. Why would you take risk to do that? So if you're going and investing in a risky security, you're doing that because you strictly want a return which is higher than the risk-free rate. So that's why rather than taking the entire portfolio return, we are only taking the excess return, where excess return has been defined with respect to the risk-free rate. So whatever you're getting in addition to the risk-free rate is your excess return. So that is what goes into the numerator. In your denominator, you have the standard deviation of the portfolio. So if you have to interpret the Sharpe ratio, that's essentially what is the excess return that you're getting per unit of risk that you are taking. Now here, keep in mind, the risk has been defined from the perspective of standard deviation. Now going back to portfolio theory, standard deviation, when used as a measure of risk, means that we are accounting for both the different kind of risk that we have, which means the diversifiable risk as well as the undiversifiable risk. So that's what we have here. So the first thing to remember is its excess return per unit of total risk. Second is that the total risk includes systematic and non-systematic risk. I hope you remember, systematic is the part which cannot be diversified away. You cannot get rid of that. And non-systematic is the part which you can diversify away by buying more securities. Now, on a standalone basis, it's actually not a very useful measure. So think of this as, let's say, a PE ratio. If you calculate the PE ratio, the price to earnings ratio of a particular company, now that would not really make a lot of sense till the time you don't compare it to the PE ratios of the other companies. Similarly, Sharpe ratio of one fund is not a very useful measure. It only becomes useful when you start comparing it to the Sharpe ratio of the other comparable funds which you have. So it only becomes relevant when compared to the Sharpe ratios of the other portfolios. In fact, the industry terms for this is Sharpes. So you would see portfolio managers saying that I'm returning 2 Sharpes or 3 Sharpes. So when they say Sharpes, they're actually referring to the Sharpe ratio. Now the simple thing here is that higher the Sharpe ratio is, the better it is. Now why is that? Remember we said Sharpe ratio is the excess return per unit of risk that you're taking. So the more return that you're able to give for the same level of risk, the better your portfolio is. So if you have to select a portfolio based on Sharpe ratio, how will you do it? From the various portfolios that you have, you calculate the Sharpe ratio for each and every portfolio, and you select the one which is the highest Sharpe ratio. So let's try doing this. So this is an example. So we have 3 different portfolio choices here, each with following characteristics. We have been given portfolio A, B, and C. We've been given the expected return and volatility for this, expected return, volatility, and beta. Now, beta is something which we're not really going to use to calculate the Sharpe ratio. It becomes relevant when we do the next measure, which would be the Treynor ratio. Right now, beta is not really required. What we need to work with is the expected return and volatility. Volatility is essentially your standard deviation. Now, let's look at the question. Now, the efficient market portfolio has an expected return of 20%, standard deviation of 12%, and the risk-free rate of interest is 5%. Remember, for Sharpe ratio, we required 3 different things, which was the return on the portfolio, which has been given here in your first column, the standard deviation, which has been given in the second column, and the risk-free rate of return, which has been given as 5%. Now, based on the Sharpe ratio, clients should choose portfolio A, B, or C. How do we do this? We simply look at the portfolio which is generating the highest Sharpe ratio. So we start calculating that. So for portfolio A, how would we calculate it? We have 15% expected return. That is your formula for the Sharpe ratio, RP minus RF divided by the standard deviation. Your portfolio return for A is 15. The risk-free rate is 5 and your standard deviation is 12. So how do we do this? We do 15 minus 5, which is your excess return, divided by 12%. So 15 minus 5 divided by 12, that's for portfolio A. Similarly, for portfolio B, it becomes 18 minus 5 divided by your standard deviation, which is 14. And similarly, for the third portfolio, that means we will do 12 minus 5 divided by 9%. So all that you need to do is to compute all of these 3 figures and select the highest one. So let's have a look at the answer. Now this is what you get. You get 0.83, 0.93, and 0.77. Now which one is the highest? That is the portfolio B, 0.93, which means portfolio B is giving you the highest excess return per unit of total risk that you have taken. Remember, total risk, because we are talking about standard deviation. So according to the Sharpe ratio, portfolio B is the one which you should invest in. Now let's look at the next measure, which is the Treynor ratio. Now, if you look at the formula, it actually looks quite similar to the Sharpe ratio, and it is. If you look at the numerator, that's exactly the same as what we have for the Sharpe ratio. That's simply excess return, which means the return in excess of the risk-free rate. So there is absolutely no difference in the numerator part of the Treynor ratio. However, the difference is in the denominator. Now, what is the difference? Earlier, we were taking standard deviation as the measure of risk. Now we are taking beta as the measure of risk. Now, I hope you remember what beta was. Beta was the measure of systematic risk. That was the risk which you cannot diversify away. So in this case, how do we define it? It's the excess return per unit of systematic risk, not total risk. Total risk was for the Sharpe ratio. This one is the only for the Treynor ratio. We use the systematic risk, which is beta. Now, you might think that how is this actually going to make a difference? Now, for understanding that, we have to take a step back to the portfolio theory. Now, if you remember the portfolio theory and the way the portfolio theory evolved, the first part of the portfolio theory took standard deviation and the second part took beta. So in the first part, we said that the investor is getting rewarded for the total risk, which means the diversifiable part as well as the non-diversifiable part. This next part was where we said that there is no reason why the market should be giving you extra return for the diversifiable risk. So essentially, if a risk could be diversified away and you're not diversifying, then it's your fault. Why should the market reward you with extra return for that? So the part which you should actually get rewarded for is the part which you cannot get rid of, which is the market risk or the systematic risk. So that is where the Treynor ratio comes in, that you're not getting rewarded for the entire risk which you're carrying. You're only getting rewarded for the market risk or the undiversifiable systematic risk part of the risk. So that is why this is a narrower measure compared to the Sharpe ratio, because Sharpe ratio was looking at the total risk, whereas Treynor ratio is only looking at the systematic risk. So it is narrower as far as the scope is concerned. Now, just like Sharpe ratio, this is not very useful on a standalone basis. Now, the same thing applies here. On a standalone basis, we can only look at the Treynor ratio. So let's say if the Treynor ratio is 1.6, if it's 2, 2.5, that's not really going to help us in interpreting that. Because in order to interpret, we need to compare it to some other Treynor ratio of some other fund. So let's say another hedge fund or another mutual fund, any other investment vehicle. Only then it becomes relevant. So the same rule applies here, that it's not too useful on a standalone basis. To make it useful, you need to compare it with some other Treynor ratio. And the higher this is, the better it is going to be. So again, if you're selecting a particular fund based on the Treynor ratio, then you need to select the one which is the highest Treynor ratio. Now, before we move on to the final measure, which is Jensen's alpha, we'll do a quick recap of the capital asset pricing model. Now, why are we doing a quick recap of the capital asset pricing model here? Now, the reason is that if we look at the capital asset pricing model, the formula of this is what actually helps us in understanding the Treynor measure. Now, why is that? Because if we look at the CAPM formula, the CAPM formula is essentially allowing us to calculate the expected return or the required return. How do we do that? To calculate the expected return, we start from the risk-free rate. Then we add beta times RM minus RF. So that is how we calculate the expected return for a portfolio. Now, what do we really mean by Jensen's alpha? Let's look at that. Now, Jensen's alpha essentially means that we are looking at how much the portfolio has been able to beat the benchmark return. So we are comparing our return, the portfolio in which you've invested in, with the return of the benchmark. So let's say if we calculated the expected return based on CAPM to be 8%, and the actual return that the portfolio gave us was 10%, that means our portfolio has outperformed the benchmark by 2%. That will be called as a positive alpha. That means that the fund manager has done some value addition, and it was a good decision to actually give our money to the fund manager because he has been able to beat the benchmark. So how do we calculate the Jensen's alpha? So if you look at the formula here, of course, the notation which we use is simply alpha. That's RP minus RF plus beta times RM minus RF. This part is nothing but your CAPM, required rate of return. RP is the actual return on the portfolio. So let's say the same example that we were taking, if this part is 8% and RP, the actual return is 10%. That means that your portfolio, your fund manager has been able to beat the benchmark by 2%, and that's your positive alpha. So if alpha is positive, that means the portfolio has outperformed the market. And of course, if alpha is negative, that means your portfolio has underperformed the market. Now, you might have heard of a very popular website called Seeking Alpha, seekingalpha.com. Now, that alpha is basically referring to the Jensen's alpha. So when you're seeking alpha, that means you're seeking higher, risk-adjusted return. You're trying to beat the benchmark as much as possible. So that is what is called as seeking alpha. Now, the value of the alpha can be used to rank the portfolios. So similar to how we use the Sharpe ratio and the Treynor ratio, we can use the alpha as well. So if we have been given multiple portfolios, let's say portfolio A, B, and C, and we have to decide which portfolio is the best, we can calculate the alphas for all of those portfolios and select the one which is the highest alpha. The good thing about alpha, which was not there with the Sharpe ratio and the Treynor measure, is that this can also be used on a standalone basis. So you can use it on a standalone basis as well as on a comparative basis. Now, how would you use it on a standalone basis? If you're given the alpha of only one particular fund and it is positive, that means you have still beaten the benchmark. Now, other portfolios or other fund managers might have beaten the benchmark even more, so they might have better alpha, but this one isn't doing bad, right? Because they've still been able to beat the benchmark. So that's how we look at alpha. Now, it's a representation of the maximum an investor should pay for the active management of a portfolio. So if a particular fund manager is charging a management fee and he's not giving you, enough excess return, then it might not be worth it. Then you should just get your money out from that fund and invest in some other fund. So that is something which you can judge based on the alpha. Now, to understand alpha better, let's try out a question. So you have this particular portfolio. A and B is, the portfolio choice which you've been given. You have to select one of those two portfolios. The return has been given and the beta of the portfolio has been given. Now, 8% and 7% are the returns. The beta is 0.7 and 1.1. Now, given a market return of 10% and a risk-free rate of 4%, you have to calculate the Jensen's alpha for both portfolios and comment which portfolio has performed better. So the obvious thing that you need to do here is simply to calculate the alpha for both the portfolios and see which portfolio has done better, so which one has a higher alpha. How do we calculate the alpha? Remember, the first step to calculating alpha is to calculate the expected return or the required return using the CAPM. So we calculate the CAPM rate of return for both portfolio A and portfolio B and see which one is higher, right? So, after comparing it to the individual returns of these portfolios. Now, how do we calculate the CAPM value for portfolio A? Now, for portfolio A, we know the beta is 0.7, risk-free rate is 4%, and the market return is 10%. That's all the information that we need to calculate the CAPM required return. So we start with the market return of 10%. Then we know the beta is 0.7. That means we'll add 0.7 times the market risk premium, which would be 10% minus the risk-free rate. So 4% is what we start with. Then we do 0.7 into 0.1 minus 4%. So that is how we calculate the CAPM rate of return for portfolio A. Similarly, for portfolio B, what would be the starting point? The starting point would be the risk-free rate, which is again 4%. That is not going to change. So 4% plus 1.1 times, then again, you have the market return of 10% and the risk-free rate of 4%. So you again do the same thing. So 4% plus 1.1 into 10% minus 4%. So this is, remember, this is not your alpha yet. This is just giving you the CAPM required rate of return. From this point, we have to still calculate the alpha. How do we do that? We compare these values which we have calculated here to the return values here. So for portfolio A, what would be the alpha? We look at the return actually given by your portfolio, which is 8%, and compare it to the return on this side. We look at the difference, so 8% minus whatever the value which we get here. Similarly for B, we look at 7% minus whatever the value which we get here. And we look at which one is the higher out of those two values. So let's have a look at the exact figures. Now for portfolio A, this figure comes out to be minus 0.002. For portfolio B, this figure comes out to be minus 0.036. Now, as you can see, both are negatives, which means both portfolio A and portfolio B actually underperformed the benchmark. So none of them have been able to actually justify the management fee, so to say. So you would have actually been better off just by investing your money into a government bond in that case, right? Because you would have been able to get the risk-free rate of return. So in this case, these portfolios have actually just underperformed the benchmark. However, we still need to select which one is the better portfolio. So even though both are negative, how do we select which one is the better one? We go for the one which is the higher alpha. So out of these two, which one is the bigger figure? It's a negative, remember that. So that's why it's minus 0.002. So the correct answer is it's portfolio A. So that's how we calculate the Jensen's alpha. So that's it for the session, guys. I hope you found this session useful.